When you picture a highly successful software engineer, there is a very specific, almost cinematic pop culture image that instantly comes to mind.
Oh, absolutely. The hacker in the dark room, right?
Right, exactly. It's usually someone sitting in this heavily air-conditioned, pitch-black room, illuminated entirely by the glow of a vertical monitor.
Yeah, with the green text just raining down the screen.
They have their noise-canceling headphones bolted to their head. They've got this mechanical keyboard clacking away at like 120 words per minute, and they are just furiously typing.
It's the whole lone genius coder trope.
Yes, the persistent, incredibly seductive myth of the lone genius coder. And the underlying promise of that myth is really simple. It's this idea that if you just put your head down, write enough brilliant, highly optimized, bug-free lines of code, and effectively out-engineer everyone else in the building, the universe will naturally step in to reward you.
Like it's some sort of cosmic vending machine. You put in the code, and out pops a promotion.
Exactly. The promotions will flow, the influence will naturally accrue, and that coveted title of senior developer will just be handed to you simply because your compiler outputs 0 errors.
Which is, it is a deeply romanticized idea. It really paints the tech industry as this flawless, pure meritocracy where the code base is the ultimate arbiter of truth.
Right. If the code compiles, you win.
Yeah, if the big O notation is optimal, and if it runs fast in production, you win the game. But anyone who has spent more than like 6 months in a mid to large scale tech company knows that the reality of how software engineering careers actually progress is vastly
A
different.
lot messier than that.
It is incredibly messy. It is highly social. It's frustratingly subjective. And frankly, it is driven far more by human psychology than by silicon.
And that tension between the comforting myth of the lone coder and the harsh reality of the human ecosystem, that is the core of what we are unpacking today.
I'm really excited for this one.
Me too. If you are listening to this, our mission is to map out the unwritten, highly obscured roadmap of a developer's career. We're tracking the journey from a junior developer who is just trying to survive the sprint backlog, all the way to an influential, highly respected senior engineer who actually dictates the technical direction of the company.
So we're looking at the whole arc.
The whole arc. We are zeroing in on how to navigate the incredibly delicate, often frustrating balance between technical excellence, which, we established right up front is non-negotiable, and the strategic accumulation of social capital.
Right, because ultimately social capital is the hidden currency required for long-term career growth.
Yeah.
You can't just code your way to the top.
Exactly. And to map this out, we are drawing on a stack of highly tactical, field-tested sources. We are synthesizing insights from Brian Jenny, who is a veteran developer who writes extensively on the raw, sometimes really uncomfortable realities of corporate power dynamics.
His stuff is fantastic.
Yeah.
Very blunt.
Very blunt. We are also integrating the strategies of 2 prominent engineering content creators. First, there's the Primetime, whose background brings a very unfiltered, almost gamified approach to surviving tech giants like Netflix.
Yeah, his perspective is so raw. And then we have Jordan Cutler, right?
Right, Jordan Cutler, who provides a highly structured, systemic breakdown of the promotion machine itself. So we are combining these perspectives to move past the sterile, HR-approved career advice and get into the actual gritty mechanics of how developers advance.
Which is exactly what people need. None of that just work hard and be a team player fluff.
No fluff here. So whether you are gearing up to start a brand new role next week, or you are deeply entrenched in the mid-level grind wondering why your career feels completely stalled, or you're simply sitting at your desk trying to reverse engineer why the loudest, most talkative person in the room just got handed the promotion you worked 60 hours a week for, this deep dive is built for you.
That last one hits close to home for a lot of people, I think.
Oh, definitely. So let's start at the absolute beginning of the life cycle. You have just signed the offer letter. You have your shiny new company laptop. It is day 1.
The honeymoon phase.
Right, the honeymoon phase. But the instinct for almost everyone in this position is this burning, overwhelming anxiety to prove your worth immediately. You want to show the hiring manager that they did not make a multi-$1,000 mistake.
Oh, yeah. You want to justify that salary by the first afternoon stand-up.
Exactly. In fact, the Primetime source openly admits that for a long time, his singular goal at every new job was to race as hard as humanly possible to get his first PR, his first pull request merged on day 1.
I remember that part.
Yeah.
He was actually frustrated at Netflix because he was late and didn't get a PR up until day 2.
Day 2. He was mad about day 2.
It is the most common instinct in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
You want to point to a merge commit and say, look, I am producing value. Please don't fire me.
But the source material completely inverts this logic, right?
It completely flips it. Rushing your technical output during the onboarding phase is actually framed as a massive, cascading strategic misstep.
Wait, really? A misstep to be productive early?
Yes, because when you first join a company, you enter a very specific, highly temporary window called the grace period. During the first few weeks, nobody, and I mean nobody, expects meaningful technical output from you.
Because they know you're just getting set up.
Exactly. Management assumes you are fighting with Docker containers, getting your VPN credentials sorted out, and literally just trying to find the break room.
But by sprinting past that setup phase just to push a minor bug fix, you are actively blinding yourself. The sources point out that if your head is buried in a localized utility file trying to resolve a tiny ticket on day 2, you are completely missing the opportunity to map out the macro systems.
You're getting lost in the weeds before you even know where the garden is.
Right. You aren't asking where the legacy data is stored or which team transforms it or why the deployment pipeline was built with the specific convoluted architecture in the first place. You are trading profound structural context for a cheap, immediate dopamine hit of a merged PR.
And the prime time explicitly refers to this exploration as going on side quests.
Side quests, I love that framing.
It's perfect because the grace period offers you zero expectation of delivery. So it is the one and only free pass you will ever get to ask seemingly obvious foundational questions without looking incompetent.
That makes so much sense.
Think about it. Imagine you are sitting in a cross-functional meeting on your 3rd day, and a senior architect casually references Project Bingo as the reason a certain feature is delayed.
Okay.
Now, if you have been at the company for 14 months, you cannot raise your hand and ask, what is Project Bingo, without severely damaging your credibility.
Right. Everyone just look at you like, where have you been for a year?
Exactly. But in week 1, you can easily drop a direct message to that architect and say, hey, I'm new. I'm trying to map out the ecosystem. What exactly is Bingo, and how does it interface with our core API?
It makes me think of playing a massive real-time strategy game.
Oh, like StarCraft or Age of Empires.
Yes, exactly. When the match starts, 95% of the map is completely blacked out by the fog of war. You can only see the tiny patch of grass immediately surrounding your starting base.
Right.
If you immediately lock your camera onto your base and just start frantically chopping wood and building tiny defensive huts without sending a single scout unit out into the fog, you are effectively playing blind.
You have no idea what's out there.
Exactly. You might build your entire economic engine right next to a hostile enemy encampment, or you might completely miss a massive resource node sitting just over the hill. That onboarding grace period is your scout. It is your only opportunity to send a unit across the map, reveal the terrain, and understand the layout of the world before the game timer demands that you start producing heavy resources.
That analogy holds up perfectly, and especially when you look at the long-term consequences of failing to scout.
What happens if you skip it?
Well, the prime time warns that if you fail to use this free time to gather systemic context, you'll find yourself 6 months down the line deeply regretting it. You'll become a sad panda, as he puts it.
A sad panda.
Yeah, because you will be assigned to a complex multi-team integration project, and you will suddenly realize you lack the fundamental architectural knowledge that you could have absorbed for free during your first 2 weeks.
So you're trapped trying to deliver high-level features while simultaneously trying to retroactively learn the basics of the infrastructure.
Which is incredibly stressful.
But let's unpack the mechanics of doing that without drowning, though. Code bases at mid to large companies often contain millions of lines of code.
Oh, easily millions.
So if your goal during the grace period is to explore the whole Mac, read the historical pull requests, and talk to architects about Project Bingo, the cognitive load is going to break you. You are drinking from a fire hose. How do you map the system without getting bogged down in the syntax of a 10-year-old monolithic repository?
So you survive the fire hose through a highly intentional filtering technique called black boxing.
Black boxing.
Yes. When you are mapping a massive architecture, you have to actively block out low-signal information. You do not need to understand every single execution path, error handler, or utility function end-to-end.
Okay, so if I open a massive legacy payment processor class,
Your instinct as an engineer is to read it line by line to see how it connects to the database.
yeah, I want to know how it works under the hood.
Black boxing requires you to actively suppress that instinct.
So if I encounter a massive legacy logging service, I'm explicitly choosing not to trace the code to see how it formats the timestamp or writes to the disk cluster.
Exactly. You treat it as an impenetrable, magical black box. Your only concern is the interface. What are the inputs required to call this box? And what is the expected output or side effect?
Oh, I see. I don't need to know the internal algorithmic complexity.
You really don't. You black box the low-signal legacy code so that you can reserve your limited cognitive bandwidth for understanding the overarching business logic. How does the logging service interact with the billing engine? That's what matters.
That makes a lot of sense.
The source material notes that a deep end-to-end understanding of the specific syntax will naturally develop over time through sheer repetition. But in the beginning, unless the architecture is fundamentally broken and actively failing, you accept the black box and keep moving across the map.
Okay, let's fast forward a bit. You have successfully navigated the grace period. You utilized your scouts. You mapped the fog of war. You black boxed the irrelevant noise. And you established a solid baseline of context.
You survived onboarding.
You survived. But now, you are officially entering the longest, most psychologically taxing phase of a developer's career. The mid-level grind.
Oh, the mid-level grind. The timeline of this progression is notoriously asymmetrical.
How so?
Well, according to Brian Jenny, the transition from a bumbling, nervous junior developer to a highly competent mid-level developer is usually a very clear, predictable 1 to 2 year runway.
Right, because you just learn how to do the job.
Exactly. It is a highly visible transformation.
Mm.
You go from needing a senior engineer to hold your hand through every Git merge conflict to being able to take a moderately complex ticket, architect a localized solution, write code that generally works, and push it through the deployment pipeline independently.
But the subsequent jump from a solid mid-level contributor to a recognized senior engineer is a massive, foggy abyss.
It really is an abyss. There is no universal checklist.
There's no standardized curriculum at all. Different engineering orgs have wildly different, often contradictory definitions of what senior even means.
Yeah, what makes you a senior at a startup might barely qualify you as mid-level at Google.
Exactly. And because the path is so completely obscured, mid-level developers experience intense anxiety. They look at their plateauing career, they panic, and they desperately search for a formula. And that panic leads directly into what Jenny identifies as the coding trap.
The coding trap is incredibly pervasive, and I think it's because it stems from a place of genuine, well-intentioned dedication.
People want to do a good job.
Right. A mid-level developer looks at their lack of upward mobility and internalizes it as a technical deficiency. They think, the reason I am not a senior engineer yet is because my code isn't elegant enough.
So how do they respond to that?
They double down on syntax. They try to become an absolute encyclopedic master of their current tech stack. Or, even more commonly, they decide that adding harder, more complex tools to their resume will force management to recognize them.
Oh, man.
Jenny specifically jokes about the phenomenon of mid-level developers running off to learn Rust in their free time.
I know so many people who have done exactly that.
Right. They are convinced that mastering a notoriously difficult systems language like Rust will act as this magical key to unlock a promotion.
So they spend 3 days refactoring a perfectly functional, boring microservice just to implement a new generic type system they read about on some tech blog.
Yep.
And then they sit back, stare at their beautiful, highly optimized, mathematically pure architecture, and then feel immense bitterness when the promotion cycle passes them by and their manager just asks why the feature ticket was delayed by 3 days.
It's heartbreaking, honestly. But there is a trap even darker and more damaging than the coding trap.
A burnout trap.
Yes. The primetime material dives deeply into this. It occurs when a developer decides that the ultimate metric for corporate success is raw, undeniable volume and sheer velocity.
They adopt the mindset of a martyr.
Exactly. They say, I will simply outwork everyone. I will volunteer for the biggest, most ambiguous, most grueling infrastructural projects on the board.
They willingly transform themselves into the foundational workhorse. They take on a massive 1.5-year-long legacy database migration or a fundamental architectural rewrite.
Which nobody else wants to do.
Right, and they carry the entire epic on their back, grinding out 60 to 80-hour weeks in absolute isolation. They truly believe that by enduring this massive technical burden, their value will become undeniable.
But the primetime source introduces a concept here that completely shatters that expectation. And it's the devastating reality of perceptual slowness.
Perceptual slowness. Let's really unpack the mechanics of this because I feel like this concept explains so much corporate misery. Walk us through why a developer working 80 hours a week is perceived as slow.
Okay, so we have to separate actual velocity from perceptual velocity.
Okay, actual versus perceptual.
Actual velocity is the objective measure of how much code you are writing, how many bugs you are squashing, and the sheer complexity of the foundational problems you are solving in the dark.
The real work.
The real work. But perceptual velocity is strictly how fast the rest of the company, so management, product owners, and parallel teams, believes you are moving.
Oh, that is a huge difference.
It's massive. When you volunteer for an 18-month structural overhaul, your daily updates become monotonous. For 40 consecutive stand-ups, your update is simply still writing the migration scripts for the legacy database.
Which is true, but sounds terrible.
To the outside world, it looks like you are completely stagnant. You are not shipping shiny new UI features every 2-week sprint. You are not demoing anything visual to the stakeholders.
So management's cognitive bias naturally favors frequent, visible, bite-sized deliverables over invisible, massive foundational improvements.
Exactly. So despite the fact that you're working yourself to the bone and preventing the company's entire back end from collapsing, the ambient perception of you turns negative. You are coded as slow.
Okay, I have to push back on this
Slow.
because it feels fundamentally broken.
It is broken.
Are the sources genuinely suggesting that a developer who spends 60 hours a week bulletproofing the core infrastructure and preventing catastrophic downtime is actively hurting their career trajectory, while someone who codes 30 hours a week but loudly ships 3 minor front-end button color changes every sprint is accelerating theirs?
It is a deeply unfair, highly uncomfortable reality, but yes. Both Jenny and the Primetime validate this exact dynamic.
Wow.
Corporate structures, by their very nature, reward visibility, highly quantifiable impact, and frequent communication over raw, silent lines of code. Now, we must add a critical caveat here so this isn't misinterpreted.
Right, we can't just tell people to write bad code.
Exactly. Jenny outlines what he calls Step 0, don't suck at coding. Technical mastery remains the absolute baseline requirement. You cannot write fragile spaghetti code and expect to talk your way into a senior architecture role.
The code cannot be an afterthought. The foundational skills have to be sharp. You must read exceptional code, you must dissect and absorb patterns from industry leaders, and you must consistently deliver robust solutions.
Precisely. But technical mastery is the starting line, not the finish line. If your entire strategy relies solely on the purity of your code, you are permanently trapped in your IDE.
So how do you break out?
Sustainable upward growth for a mid-level engineer requires a radical perspective shift. You have to lift your head up from the compiler and analyze the business as a whole. You must recognize that the traditional reward for being the fast, silent, perfectly reliable workhorse who never complains is
more work.
more work. You will simply be handed the next massive, unglamorous infrastructural nightmare. This cycle inevitably leads to profound burnout, usually accompanied by deep resentment as you watch highly visible, highly communicative peers take the credit and get the promotions.
So if locking yourself in a dark room and grinding out 80-hour weeks on legacy refactors is a one-way ticket to burnout, what is the alternative mechanism for growth? The sources point to a strategy that makes a lot of highly technical people incredibly anxious, which is mapping corporate power dynamics.
Yeah, engineers generally hate politics.
Yeah.
But the primetime transcript leans heavily into this realization. Advancing your career requires acknowledging that your job description extends far beyond engineering.
It requires a systematic understanding of the human ecosystem. Who owns which initiatives, why certain projects are funded while others die, and critically, who matters.
Identifying who matters.
Which, I'll be honest, sounds incredibly Machiavellian.
It sounds ruthless, I agree, but it is the mechanics of how any human organization functions. The primetime speaker illustrates this with a stark, highly clarifying hypothetical.
Okay, let's hear it.
Imagine you are walking down the hallway of your office. You are 5 minutes late for a critical sprint planning meeting. A random coworker from other department stops you and asks for help debugging a minor script. What is your response?
You politely say, I am so sorry I'm late for a critical engineering meeting, and you continue walking. You protect your time.
Right. Now, invert the variables. You are walking down that exact same hallway, late for that exact same meeting, but Reed Hastings, the CEO of Netflix, where the speaker used to work, steps out of an office, stops you, and says, hey, do you have 5 minutes? I want your perspective on something. What do you do?
You drop everything.
Yep.
You abandon the sprint planning meeting entirely, you spend 45 minutes talking to the CEO, and when your engineering manager inevitably pulls you aside later to ask why you no-showed the planning session, you simply say, Reed Hastings pulled me into a discussion.
And your manager instantly pivots from being annoyed to being impressed.
Because intuitively, we all understand that time, impact, and individuals are not weighted equally within a hierarchy.
Hmm.
Mapping out that power dynamic is the mandatory first step to navigating it. You have to actively identify the true decision makers.
Exactly. And the primetime source conceptualizes this as finding the wizards within your organization. Yes, these are the Pareto principle in action. The 20% of the engineering staff who are quietly executing the 80% of the high-leverage work that actually keeps the company operational and profitable.
Building that internal wizard list is a fascinating tactical exercise. The source notes that when you join a large org, it might take a month or two just to figure out who these people are, and initially it is heavily vibes-based.
Right, you're just feeling it out.
You have to listen closely during cross-team syncs. Who do the other engineers defer to when a complex architectural question arises? You also map their proximity to the core primitives of the business.
Meaning, are they maintaining an internal HR dashboard that no one uses? Or are they the primary maintainers of the real-time billing engine that processes millions of dollars an hour?
Exactly. But the most critical filter, the ultimate test before you categorize someone as a wizard, requires diving into their actual repository history.
Which introduces one of the most entertaining yet genuinely cautionary concepts in the entire stack of sources.
Yeah.
The ever-present danger of aligning yourself with a Gilderoy Lockhart.
Yes. For the uninitiated, Gilderoy Lockhart is a character from the Harry Potter universe.
Great reference.
He is a famous, heavily decorated wizard who has written dozens of autobiographies detailing his incredible, heroic encounters with dark creatures. But the twist is that he is actually a complete fraud. He never fought any monsters. He simply tracked down the real heroes, wiped their memories, and claimed their stories as his own.
He's a professional credit stealer.
Exactly. So how does that translate into the mechanics of a software engineering department?
In any corporate environment that scales beyond a few hundred engineers, a specific archetype begins to emerge. The internal engineering influencer.
The influencers.
The primetime source refers to them as the yappers. These individuals are exceptionally gifted communicators. They are the big ideas people. They dominate architectural kickoff meetings. They aggressively push for massive paradigm shifts. They speak entirely in buzzwords, and they possess towering internal reputations.
And management often views them as visionaries.
But, and here's the trap, when you bypass the meetings and actually run a git blame on the core modules, or you audit their commit history over the last 3 quarters, you discover a horrifying truth.
Their actual technical output is practically non-existent.
Zero. They generate friction, propose massive rewrites, and then quietly step back while the silent workhorses, the true wizards, actually build the systems.
And the primetime speaker shares a deeply personal, painful anecdote about this, right?
Yeah, he talks about working 70 to 80-hour weeks to keep a collapsing project alive, while a Lockhart on the team did all the talking in the executive updates and successfully harvested all the recognition.
So if you blindly attach your career trajectory to a Lockhart, you will eventually find yourself doing all their work while they receive the promotion.
It's a nightmare scenario.
It really is such a clarifying framework. If you think about it, navigating a corporate hierarchy is fundamentally identical to reverse engineering an undocumented API.
Oh, I love that comparison.
Right. The official org chart, the PDF that HR emails you on your first day, is just the public-facing documentation. It tells you who officially reports to whom. But the real routing table, the actual underlying network architecture of how technical decisions are made, whose opinions actually carry weight in a crisis, and who is secretly just a Lockhart routing request to a back end of overworked juniors, that is completely hidden from view.
You can't read it anywhere.
You cannot read it. You have to actively ping the endpoints, test the network latency, observe the data flow, and manually map out the real power dynamics yourself.
That is a highly precise way to conceptualize it. It requires treating social dynamics as a systems design problem. You are mapping the true architecture of the org.
And to be clear, the goal of this exercise isn't to become a cynical, credit-stealing manipulator.
No, not at all. The goal is self-preservation and strategic positioning. You want to identify the real wizard so you can get into the rooms where the high-leverage technical decisions are being made.
You want proximity to power not to feed your ego, but because you want the agency, the budget, and the freedom to work on foundational systems that actually move the needle, rather than being perpetually stuck at the bottom of the funnel executing JIRA tickets that a Lockhart hallucinated.
Exactly. So let's operationalize this. You have spent your first few months pinging the endpoints. You have successfully bypassed the official org chart, you have verified the commit histories, and you have identified a true wizard who maintains the core billing primitive.
Okay, I found my wizard. Now what?
How do you actually bridge the gap? Because the reality is, you cannot just walk up to a staff engineer who is 4 levels above you, tap him on the shoulder and say, "Hello, I have identified you as a high-value asset. Please mentor me so I can be promoted."
Yeah, that would be terrifying.
It requires an entirely different approach.
Hmm.
And this brings us to the mechanics of strategic relationship building. And the advice here gets incredibly granular and, frankly, it's a bit controversial.
The Prime Time shares a story about an anime emoji that perfectly encapsulates this. It is an amazing case study in patience.
The 8-month wait.
Yes. So the speaker identifies one of the ultimate wizards at his company. This specific engineer is categorized as free electron. He has been with the company for 15 years. He holds unparalleled architectural knowledge, but he is notoriously unapproachable.
Deeply introverted.
Deeply introverted, entirely focused on the code, and has zero interest in corporate networking. The speaker knows he needs to establish a connection, but a standard "let's grab coffee" Slack message will be ignored.
Completely ignored.
So he does some reconnaissance. He notices, through peripheral observation, that this wizard is a massive fan of one highly specific anime. The speaker goes out, finds a custom emoji from that exact anime, and uploads it to the global company's Slack workspace.
But the critical detail is the restraint. He doesn't immediately DM the wizard with the emoji.
He waits for 8 months.
8 months.
For 8 entire months, that custom emoji sits unused on the company servers. He waits until the exact organic moment presents itself in a public channel to drop that specific emoji as a reaction to something the wizard posted.
And the trap springs.
The trap springs. The wizard sees it, is entirely caught off guard, and replies, "Wow, who uploaded that?" That single, highly calculated micro-interaction sparked a natural conversation about their shared hobbies.
Which then evolved.
Yes, that hobby discussion slowly evolved into casual conversations about system architecture, which eventually blossomed into a genuine friendship, which ultimately paved the way for massive, high-impact project collaborations between their respective teams.
It is an absolute masterclass in playing the long game of social capital. The source material outlines several other passive data gathering tactics as well. If you want to connect with a wizard, you join the obscure Slack channels where they hang out. You actively read their pull requests, not just to review the code, but to understand their specific stylistic preferences. You search their JIRA ticket history to analyze how they break down complex problems.
You are effectively feeding your brain a data set about their professional traits so that when you do interact, your communication is perfectly tuned to their frequency.
Exactly.
But I have to pause here because we really need to address the ethical discomfort this raises. The source material explicitly calls this out as the stalker vibe or the sociopath critique.
Yeah, people get very uncomfortable with this.
If I am keeping a mental or literally physical CRM, a customer relationship management notebook, tracking a senior engineer's preferred communication style, their hobbies, and their JIRA history, just so I can hack their dialogue tree for a career power-up, where is the line? How is that not just deeply manipulative transactional behavior?
That is the million-dollar question. And the critique is entirely valid if the behavior is rooted in what the source terms a consumerist mindset.
Consumerist mindset.
Yes. A consumerist approach treats human beings purely as disposable utilities. You identify a senior engineer, you extract their architectural knowledge, you leverage their reputation to get your project approved, and the moment they are no longer strategically useful to your promotion packet, you stop replying to their messages.
Right.
That is manipulation, and people possess a highly tuned radar for it. They will sense they are being used, and it will permanently destroy your reputation.
So how is keeping notes on them not that?
Because we have to look at the underlying mechanism of why we track this information. The sources compare this systematic approach to the behavior of elite sales professionals.
Oh, like the salesperson who remembers that you mentioned your dog was sick 3 months ago and asks about it before pitching you.
Precisely. Why does that feel good rather than creepy? Because the fundamental human desire in the workplace is to feel seen and understood. The distinction between manipulation and empathy is entirely dependent on intent.
Intent is the divider.
Yes. If you maintain a mental database of your coworkers' preferences, knowing that a specific architect despises 9 a.m. syncs but loves asynchronous, highly detailed design docs in the afternoon, you alter your behavior to match their preference, you are removing friction from their day.
You are adapting to their needs to create a more functional, supportive team environment. Systematizing your empathy doesn't make it fake, it makes it reliable.
Exactly. Systematized empathy. Now, Jordan Cutler's framework offers a highly structured, mutually beneficial alternative for those who still find the passive observation approach too Machiavellian. He suggests leveraging formal systems.
Cutler's advice on reverse mentorship is brilliant. We always assume mentorship flows strictly upstream. You must find a staff engineer to pull you up.
Cutler advises completely inverting the flow. Instead of endlessly hunting for a senior wizard to adopt you, you actively seek out a newly hired junior engineer and ask if you can mentor them.
The mechanics of this are incredible. First, a junior engineer is almost guaranteed to say yes because they are drowning and desperate for context. Second, establishing a weekly sync to help them debug their tickets forces you to articulate technical concepts clearly, which builds your own architectural muscles.
Entered.
Third, from a purely strategic standpoint, it signals to your management chain that you are already operating with a senior mindset. You are actively scaling the capabilities of the team, which is the exact metric required for a promotion.
It's a win-win-win.
Absolutely. So grand strategic plays like an 8-month emoji sting operation or formally taking a junior dev under your wing are vital for positioning. But massive deposits of social capital are relatively rare. The bulk of your influence within an engineering org is built and very frequently destroyed in the microscopic, mundane, day-to-day interactions. The daily habits. Let's examine the daily habits that actively build relational leverage.
The prime time introduces a cultural mantra for this. The goal is to be consistently serviceable, friendly, and fast.
Serviceable, friendly, and fast.
The foundational mindset is that no task is inherently beneath you. There is a specific operating principle discussed here. Sometimes, the most agonizingly junior menial tasks can only be successfully completed by the most senior engineers on the team.
See, that seems entirely backward to me. Shouldn't the senior engineers be shielded from the menial tasks so they can focus entirely on high-level system design?
In a theoretical vacuum, yes. But the reality of software development is that certain tasks, like tracking down a deeply buried, obscure dependency conflict in a legacy build pipeline, are highly menial, incredibly boring, and require an immense, almost unreasonable reservoir of patience to resolve.
Right.
A junior engineer will simply lack the historical context and the sheer willpower to brute force their way through it. When a senior engineer willingly descends from the architectural ivory tower, picks up that terrible ticket, and silently resolves it, they generate an astronomical amount of trust and goodwill from the rest of the team.
Because they took the bullet for everyone else. But just as there are reliable mechanisms for building trust, there are highly efficient mechanisms for instantly vaporizing it. The sources highlight the classic trap of the overly aggressive PR reviewer.
Oh no, the PR reviewer.
We've all worked with this engineer. The source gives a perfect, agonizing example. A developer submits a pull request. The code is structurally sound, the logic is flawless, and the tests pass. But the reviewer refuses to approve it.
Why?
They actively block the merge because the promise variables in a specific function are named res and res for resolve and reject, and the reviewer demands, on principle, that they be explicitly typed out as resent and rejoice.
Wow. That is a hilarious example of peak engineering pedantry.
Right. But it illustrates a critical mechanism of social destruction. Every time you interact with your team, you are dealing with what we can conceptualize as relational technical debt.
Relational technical debt. I like that.
When you block a PR over trivial syntax preferences, or you give a blunt one-word response in Slack to a genuine question, or you publicly humiliate a junior dev during a code review, you are taking out a loan against your social capital. You are accruing relational debt.
And you might feel intellectually superior in the moment.
But that debt compounds. Eventually, the interest rate becomes unsustainable. When you subsequently try to propose a massive architectural change, the team will subconsciously resist your proposal, not because the architecture is bad, but because they fundamentally dislike working with you.
It's so true. People will veto your code just because they don't like you. To avoid accruing that debt, Jordan Cutler advocates for actively making microdeposits. He suggests becoming the patron saint of the internal Slack help channels.
But the execution is key there, isn't it?
Very key. When a developer from another team drops a frantic question about an API endpoint, the standard cold response is to simply paste a link to the internal documentation wiki and say nothing else.
Just RTFM.
Exactly. That is technically correct, but it is relationally bankrupt. Cutler advises taking the extra 60 seconds. You paste the link to the docs, but you also extract the specific code snippet they need, paste it directly into the chat, and add a friendly human message.
Hey, dealing with this endpoint is a nightmare. Here is the exact payload structure you need. Let me know if it still throws an error.
Yes. That extra 60 seconds is a massive deposit into your social capital account. He also points to the immense power of volunteering for the radioactive waste of agile development, the retrospective action items.
Oh, the sprint retro, the ultimate standoff.
Everyone sits on the Zoom call, looking at a board full of action items like updating a broken integration test or writing a postmortem for a minor outage, and everyone is silently praying they don't get assigned to do it.
Just staring at each other.
When you proactively raise your hand and say, "I'll take the test cleanup," you instantly relieve the anxiety of every other person on that call. You position yourself as the ultimate team player.
However, the primetime source issues a severe warning about a psychological state that prevents developers from executing any of these strategies. It is the hurry mindset.
The hurry mindset.
The perpetual state of engineering panic. Software engineers exist in an environment where the backlog is functionally infinite. There is an endless queue of JIRA tickets stretching to the horizon. Because of this, developers constantly feel a frantic, low-level panic to clear their board. They rush from one task to the next.
And the tragedy of the hurry mindset is that it completely strips you of the capacity to be friendly.
Yes. When you're rushing, a question from a junior dev feels like a hostile interruption rather than an opportunity to build influence.
The expert insight here is that artificially forcing yourself to slow down is a high-leverage career hack. If you intentionally slow your technical output by 2% to create the mental space required to write a warm Slack response, or to pair program with a struggling teammate for 20 minutes, your technical velocity barely dips, but your ambient social influence within the organization increases exponentially.
Okay, so you have survived the mid-level grind. You have built a massive reservoir of social capital. You have avoided the Lockharts, aligned with the wizards, mentored the juniors, and maintained a reputation for being exceptionally helpful.
You're doing everything right.
As your influence scales, the expectations placed upon you naturally shift. You are no longer evaluated solely on your ability to clear your personal sprint board. You become responsible for the structural integrity of the ecosystem itself.
Which brings us to the actual mechanics of the transition to senior engineer.
Right. And that involves two massive paradigm shifts: driving code-based cohesion and running toward production fires.
To understand this transition, we need to clearly define the senior role. Both Cutler and Jenny are adamant that a senior engineer is not simply a mid-level engineer who types faster.
It's a completely different job.
It is. Cutler defines the senior transition as the ability to take a project from 0 to 1. It is the capacity to take a highly ambiguous business problem, coordinate with product managers, negotiate constraints with designers, architect the technical solution, and drive it through to deployment.
And Jenny frames this evolution as a fundamental shift in empathy. His step one for operating at a senior level is beautifully blunt. You must stop thinking about yourself.
Stop thinking about yourself.
He explicitly states, software is a team sport. When you are a junior, your only concern is whether your specific 50 lines of code compile. At the mid-level, your scope expands slightly. You want your feature module to integrate cleanly with the main branch. But a senior engineer is burdened with caring about the holistic, macro-level health of the entire repository.
Jenny introduces this brilliant metric called code-based cohesion. He says that if you read through a highly functional, healthy code base, it should read as if it were authored by a single, highly disciplined individual.
That's a high bar.
The analogy he uses is reading a book. If you pick up a novel, you expect the tone, the grammar, and the perspective to be consistent from chapter to chapter. In a toxic, fragmented code base, every individual developer is aggressively reinventing the wheel to suit their personal preferences.
Oh, I've seen that. You end up with 4 different date formatting utility functions, all written in completely different paradigms, scattered across the repository.
Exactly. A senior engineer is the person who actively scans the horizon, spots that fragmentation, and actually cares enough to fix it. They consolidate the scattered logic. They build the standardized, highly reusable, bulletproof patterns. They are essentially paving the roads so that the junior and mid-level engineers can drive their future cars faster and safer.
They lay the infrastructure. But code-based cohesion is the quiet, methodical part of being a senior. Jenny's step 2 is where the adrenaline is required. Step 2 is the mandate to run toward fires.
This is the crucible of technical leadership. When a massive catastrophic system outage occurs, when the primary database cluster goes offline, or, to use Jenny's specific nightmare scenario, the CEO discovers a critical checkout bug while doing a live product demo on a golf course.
Oh man, the golf course demo bug.
It's the worst. How do you react? The mid-level instinct is to close your laptop, shrink into your chair, and silently pray that the DevOps team gets paged instead of you.
Naturally.
But the senior mandate is to deliberately step into the blast radius.
But Jenny provides a massive, incredibly nuanced warning about the exact phrasing you use when you step into that fire. This is a masterclass in incident management psychology. When the production database is actively melting down, he says you must never raise your hand and declare, "I'll fix it."
Never.
You are strictly instructed to say, "I'll investigate." Walk us through the psychological mechanics of that distinction. Why is "I'll fix it" so dangerous?
It comes down to managing panic and controlling executive expectations. When a system is down, executives are terrified. If you aggressively claim, "I'll fix it," you are making an absolute guarantee about an incredibly complex system whose failure state you do not yet understand.
You're writing a check you might not be able to cash.
Exactly. If it
Okay.
turns out the issue requires a vendor patch that will take 6 hours, you have broken your promise and you absorb the full fury of the executive panic. By stating, "I'll investigate," you establish yourself as the calm, methodical incident commander.
You buy yourself operational space.
Jenny advises establishing a strict cadence. You provide a highly visible, plain language update every 60 minutes. Even if the update is just, "We have ruled out the load balancer, we are now analyzing the query logs."
And the most brilliant mechanism of this strategy is what Jenny calls the halo effect. You might dive into the telemetry, trace the issue, and realize it is a highly obscure AWS networking failure that you personally have absolutely no idea how to resolve. You are forced to page the specialized infrastructure team to actually write and deploy the patch.
But because you were the one who ran toward the fire, because you established the communication channel, and because you coordinated the cross-team response, you were bathed in the halo effect.
The executive team associates you with the resolution. You are perceived as the hero who restored the system, even if your hands never touched the actual deployment script.
This strategy perfectly synchronizes with Jordan Cutler's mandate to establish domain expertise. If you want to be the person running the incident response, the organization needs to associate you with a specific, highly critical domain.
It doesn't matter if your domain is database query optimization, complex front-end state management, or web accessibility standards, you must carve out a specialty.
When a critical fire breaks out within that specific domain, you want the entire engineering department's reflex to be, "Get them in the room immediately." That gravitational pull of expertise is what guarantees you access to the high-stakes environments where senior promotions are forged.
But I want to push back on the mechanics of this because I see a massive trap here.
Okay, lay it on me.
If you become the undisputed domain expert in debugging the legacy database, and you establish a reputation for constantly running toward the fires and successfully putting them out, don't you permanently pigeonhole yourself? You just become the organization's designated firefighter. You spend your entire career running around with an extinguisher, keeping the old systems alive, and you are never given the bandwidth to architect the exciting greenfield R&D projects.
That is the ultimate paradox of hypercompetence. If you are too good at maintaining the legacy system, management will never let you leave it.
So how do you escape?
To escape this trap, we return to the gamified strategy outlined by the primetime source.
Yep.
You do not run toward fires out of pure altruism. You extinguish fires to rapidly accumulate an immense concentration of executive trust. And then, crucially, you barter that trust.
The source talks explicitly about trading his accumulated stature for agency. He puts out the fire so he can build enough political capital to effectively break the company rules and bypass the bureaucracy when he wants to build something new.
Exactly. You willingly absorb the pain of the legacy bugs so that when a massive, highly visible greenfield project is finally announced, you have the relational leverage to walk into your director's office and say, "I want to lead the architecture on this new initiative."
Because you have a proven track record.
Because you have a proven track record of remaining calm under fire and delivering under pressure, Management will bypass the standard selection process and hand you the keys. You trade your firefighting capital for the agency to dictate your own roadmap.
But to execute on that massive new project, to truly operate at a staff or principal level, you run into a physical limitation. You cannot type fast enough to build a massive system alone. You have to find a mechanism to scale your brain.
Which brings us to the final evolution of our roadmap, the ultimate counterintuitive shift for a high-level senior engineer. To have the maximum possible impact on the code base, you actually have to transition away from writing code.
Brian Jennings' article drops a profoundly clarifying quote here. He says, "Writing code for a living is mostly just writing."
It's so true.
As you crack the threshold into senior leadership, your primary output shifts from functional algorithms to pure communication. You begin writing massive, context-heavy pull request descriptions so that your team understands exactly how to safely test complex edge cases. You write incredibly detailed code comments to explain obscure, seemingly illogical business constraints, like why a specific payment module forces a 3-second delay for users in one specific geographic region.
And you write highly rigorous JIRA tickets so that junior engineers can execute flawlessly without needing to ask you questions.
And in a twist that many pure computer science graduates find horrifying, you spend hours writing plain language emails to the marketing director to explain why adding a simple 3D animation to the landing page requires fundamentally re-architecting the rendering pipeline and will take 3 weeks to build.
That specific translation skill is a massive organizational multiplier. Your company is vastly larger than the engineering department. Ginny astutely points out that the vast majority of software developers are completely incapable of translating complex technical constraints into plain language for non-technical stakeholders.
If you can master the art of plain language communication, you stop being just a developer and you become the crucial bridge between the executive business strategy and the underlying code base.
Jordan Cutler provides a highly actionable mechanical roadmap for leveraging this writing superpower to initiate those massive 0-to-1 projects we discussed earlier. He advises looking for the complaint zones.
The complaint zone.
By the specific legacy module or the fragmented deployment pipeline that every single engineer on your team loudly complains about during retro. Instead of joining the chorus of complaints or trying to secretly refactor the module over the weekend, you weaponize your writing. You draft a one-pager.
But let's clarify how to write a one-pager that actually works, because you can't just write a document that says, the code is ugly, we need to rewrite it. Management doesn't care if the code is ugly.
Exactly. A successful one-pager is a strategic proposal. You clearly define the technical problem, but you immediately anchor it to a business metric. You don't say the code is messy. You say, this legacy module is causing a 15% increase in bug regressions, which is delaying our feature delivery by 2 days every sprint.
Then you outline your proposed architectural solution, the required engineering hours to execute it, and the ultimate return on investment for the business. You take that single polished document, hand it to your engineering manager, and simply ask, can we prioritize this?
The psychology of why that works is so simple. Managers are perpetually overwhelmed. They are drowning in complaints. By writing the one-pager, you have done the heavy lifting of conceptualizing the abstract problem into a structured, actionable package.
You aren't handing your manager a problem to solve. You are handing them a fully formed solution to approve. And naturally, because you offered the blueprint, they are going to assign you to lead the execution.
It is the ultimate mechanism for scaling your knowledge. You cannot physically sit at the desk of every junior developer and pair program with them. You cannot attend every cross-functional product meeting.
Writing organizes the complex architectural web in your head and translates it into an asynchronous asset that can operate across the entire company without requiring your physical presence.
Think of it through this lens. The actual code, the functions, the loops, the database queries, are just the physical bricks of a building. But the writing, the architectural decision records, the detailed one-pagers, the comprehensive pull request context, that is the architectural blueprint.
You can be the fastest bricklayer in the world, but you can only lay one brick at a time. If you want to lead a massive construction crew to build a skyscraper, you have to stop laying bricks and learn how to draw the blueprint so that 100 other people can lay the bricks for you.
That is the perfect encapsulation of the journey. That is the exact mechanism by which you convert raw, localized technical knowledge into widespread, highly respected organizational leadership. It's about actively leveraging all of the hard-earned social capital, the empathy, and the strategic visibility we have discussed today, and using it to dictate the broader technical direction of the company, rather than remaining trapped at the bottom of the funnel, passively executing whatever tickets happen to fall onto your board.
Let's pull back and look at the macro level map we have charted today. We started by dismantling the myth of the lone coder. We established the vital importance of the onboarding grace period, suppressing the ego-driven urge to sprint to a PR, and instead deploying scouts into the fog of war to map the underlying systems and black box the legacy noise.
We examined the psychological trap of the mid-level plateau, exploring why doubling down on complex syntax or volunteering to be the silent workhorse on an 18-month epic often results in perceptual slowness and crushing burnout.
We dove into the often uncomfortable realities of corporate power dynamics. We mapped the undocumented API of human influence, learning how to verify the commit histories to locate the true wizards, while actively avoiding the catastrophic trap of attaching your career to a highly visible, zero-output Lockhart.
We explored the mechanics of strategic relationship building, demonstrating that maintaining a mental database of your colleagues' preferences, whether it takes an 8-month wait for an anime emoji or establishing a reverse mentorship with a junior, is not manipulation. It is systematized empathy.
We analyzed the daily habits that govern the relational technical debt of an organization. We saw why taking on the radioactive retrospective tasks and intentionally slowing down to escape the hurry mindset are massive multipliers for your social capital account.
And finally, we broke down the transition to true senior leadership. We defined code-based cohesion, the exact psychological phrasing required to run toward production fires without getting burned, and the ultimate necessity of putting down the keyboard and picking up the pen to scale your architectural vision through asynchronous writing.
It is a comprehensive, highly tactical roadmap. But before we conclude, we must acknowledge a harsh, entirely unavoidable reality that Brian Jenny highlights in his work. You can execute this roadmap flawlessly. You can squash the critical bugs. You can build unshakable cohesion within your team. You can author brilliant architectural one-pagers, and you can secure the absolute trust of the executive suite.
And you still might not get the promotion in the next cycle.
You might run into an immovable wall of corporate bureaucracy. The macroeconomic climate might force a company-wide hiring and promotion freeze. The department budget might simply be exhausted. The timeline for receiving the actual title change and the salary bump can be maddeningly, unfairly unpredictable.
But Jenny's final piece of advice is the anchor for this entire philosophy. You must adopt these behaviors regardless of the immediate reward. Even if the title is delayed by a fiscal year, operating at this level transforms your daily experience. You stop being a victim of the organizational chaos and become the architect of it. By systematically building your technical foundation and your social capital, your eventual success, whether at your current company or the next, becomes a mathematical inevitability.
We began this discussion with the deeply ingrained image of the genius coder sitting alone in the dark, believing that the compiler is the only judge of value. We have systematically disassembled that myth to reveal the complex, highly human machinery that actually powers a career. But as you head into your next stand-up or sit down to review your next pull request, I want to leave you with one final, slightly provocative thought to turn over in your mind.
It is an idea that contextualizes everything we have discussed about the reality of this industry.
Consider this timeline. The senior title is statistically the plateau. It is the title you will likely hold for the longest continuous period of your entire working life. Furthermore, if you look back at the history of software development, the brilliant, flawless, heavily optimized code you stressed over and deployed today, it is almost entirely ephemeral. It will almost certainly be refactored, entirely deleted, or rendered completely obsolete by a paradigm shift in the next 5 years.
If the underlying syntax inevitably disappears and the corporate title eventually plateaus, what is the actual enduring legacy you are leaving behind?
It is not the elegant loop structure you wrote. Your legacy is the junior engineers you chose to mentor. It is the culture of psychological safety you shaped by refusing to nitpick a PR. It is the social capital you willingly invested to make your team's daily life slightly less chaotic. So tomorrow morning, when you open your laptop and stare at the infinite backlog of tickets, you have to answer a fundamental question. Are you actively building a resilient, influential career, or are you just typing?